The advertisement in the dusty San Francisco Gazette had been for a wife. Plain, hard-working, and compliant. A woman to manage a home, to raise a child left motherless by prairie fever. For Caleb, a man carved from the unyielding granite of the Montana territories, it was a transaction. He had sent the money, a sum that cost him a year's profit from his meager ranch, and waited. He expected a woman with hands as calloused as his own, a face weathered by hardship, a spirit already broken to the yoke of a difficult life. He expected function, not feeling. He did not expect my. When she stepped from the train onto the splintered platform of Dust Devil Creek, the wind tugging at her dark, simple tunic, a silence fell over the small clutch of onlookers. She was not plain. She was like a piece of finely wrought porcelain set down in a grimy workshop, delicate and seemingly out of place, yet possessing an unspoken strength in the straightness of her spine. Her face was a canvas of quiet sorrows, her eyes deep and dark, holding the ghosts of a world he could not comprehend. The agent, a man with a greasy smile, grunted and handed Caleb the paperwork. A bill of sale, disguised as a marriage contract. Caleb's jaw tightened. He nodded once, a curt, dismissive gesture, and took the small bag from her hand. He did not offer his name. He did not ask for hers. The long wagon ride back to his homestead was a study in silence, a void broken only by the creak of the wheels and the lonely cry of a hawk circling a sky the color of faded denim. He sat rigid, his gaze fixed on the horizon. She sat in the back, a still, silent figure, her hands folded in her lap, watching the vast, unforgiving land swallow them whole. It was a landscape that mirrored the man beside her, stark, beautiful, and walled off by a brutal kind of loneliness. They arrived as dusk bled across the plains, painting the raw-boned cabin in shades of purple and gray. The home was a testament to his grief, a place scrubbed clean of life. The floors were swept, the sparse furniture arranged with rigid precision, but there was no warmth, no sign of comfort. It was a shelter, not a home, a place to survive, not to live. A small face, framed by blonde hair, peeked from behind a doorway. The child, Lily, her eyes wide and wary, a miniature reflection of her father's stoicism. Caleb gestured vaguely towards a small, curtained-off alcove. "That is your room," he said, the words rough from disuse. "The well is out back. You will cook. You will mend. You will care for the girl." It was a list of duties, not a welcome. He turned and left, the slam of the main door punctuating the end of their first and only conversation. Left alone in the deepening gloom, Mai did not weep. She ran a hand over the rough-hewn wood of the table, her touch light, assessing. She saw the ghost of another woman in the faded patch on the wall where a picture once hung, in the single, chipped teacup that sat apart from the tin mugs. This was a house of profound absence, a place hollowed out by loss. And into this emptiness, she brought not words, but work. She unpacked her small bundle, a few items of clothing, a small packet of herbs wrapped in silk, and a pair of finely pointed sewing needles. She lit the stove, the first flicker of new flame in the cold heart of the house, and began to make order from the quiet chaos of their sorrow. The silence was no longer empty, it was filled with the soft sounds of her purpose. The days that followed fell into a quiet, unvarying rhythm. Caleb would rise before dawn, his movements economical and silent, and be gone to the fields, a remote figure against the vastness of the land. Mai would already have the fire going, coffee simmering on the stove, its bitter aroma a lonely flag of domesticity. She did not speak to him, and he did not speak to her. Communication was a language of objects left and taken. He would leave a sack of flour on the porch, she would transform it into bread that filled the cabin with a scent of warmth and life it had not known in years. He would leave a pile of torn work clothes, she would return them mended, the stitches so fine and even they seemed woven into the original fabric, a silent act of restoration. She moved through the house like a phantom of grace, bringing a gentle order to its starkness. She scrubbed the floors until the wood grain shone. She washed the single window until the harsh sunlight streamed in, clear and unfiltered, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air like tiny, hopeful spirits. One morning, she found a single, stubborn wildflower pushing its way through the hard-packed earth by the door. She picked it and placed it in a tin cup of water on the center of the table. It was a small, fragile splash of color in a world of brown and gray. Caleb saw it when he came in for his midday meal. He stopped, his gaze fixed on the delicate purple petals. He said nothing, but he did not move the cup. He ate his meal in his usual silence, but his eyes kept returning to that small, defiant flower, a quiet testament to a life that refused to be extinguished. The first to break the unspoken truce of silence was the child. Lily, who had been a ghost in her own home, began to watch me with a solemn curiosity. She would sit in a corner, clutching a faceless cornhusk doll, her blue eyes tracking Mai's every movement as she kneaded dough or sorted beans. She saw a gentleness in the woman's hands, a quiet patience that was the antithesis of her father's rigid sorrow. Mai was aware of the child's scrutiny but never forced an interaction. She simply created a space for the girl to enter if she chose. One afternoon, while sitting on the porch steps, Mai took a small piece of scrap wood and a paring knife and began to carve. Her hands moved with a fluid, practiced grace, and slowly, a shape emerged from the wood, a small, delicate bird, its head cocked as if listening for a song. She smoothed its edges with a piece of sandstone until it was silky to the touch, and then, when Lily was asleep, she placed it on the girl's pillow. The next morning, Lily came into the main room, not hiding behind the door, but walking directly to where Mai was stirring a pot over the stove. She held the wooden bird clutched in her small hand. For a long moment, she just stood there, her small face a mask of concentration. Then, she held it out. "Does it sing?" she asked, her voice small and clear, a silver bell in the heavy silence. It was the first direct question, the first real crack in the frozen surface of their lives. A sad, gentle smile touched Mai's lips. She shook her head softly, then raised a hand to her own throat and hummed a low, haunting melody, a lullaby from a land thousands of miles away. From the doorway of the barn, Caleb watched, unseen. He heard his daughter's question and the woman's soft, melodic answer, and a strange, painful tightness bloomed in his chest, a feeling he had long since buried. The wooden bird became a bridge. Lily, no longer a spectator, became Mai's quiet shadow. She would help pat out dough with floury hands, her small face serious with concentration. She would follow Mai to the chicken coop, her questions now coming in a slow, steady trickle. "Why is the sky blue? Where did you come from? Do you miss it?" Mai answered not always with words, but with actions. She showed Lily how to find constellations in the vast, starry sky. She taught her how to weave the stems of wildflowers into a crown. She would tell her stories without a common language, using her expressive hands and the soft cadence of her voice to paint pictures of faraway places with dragons and laughing rivers. Caleb remained a distant planet in their small, slowly warming solar system. He observed their growing bond from afar, his expression unreadable. He saw his daughter's cheeks regain their color, heard the sound of her laughter, a sound he thought had been lost to him forever. He found himself lingering by the cabin door in the evenings, listening to the soft murmur of their voices. The house was changing. It was no longer a silent tomb. It was breathing again. But the world outside their small patch of land remained as harsh and unforgiving as ever. Dark clouds began to gather on the horizon, not just in the sky, but in the suspicious glances they received on their rare trips to town. The whispers followed them like burrs on a blanket. The change was coming, a crucible not of their own making. The wind began to pick up, carrying the scent of snow and a warning of the coming trial, a storm that would either shatter their fragile world or forge it into something unbreakable. The blizzard did not arrive, it descended. A sudden, violent onslaught of white fury that erased the horizon and swallowed the world. The wind screamed like a banshee, clawing at the log walls of the cabin, searching for any weakness. Snow piled in great drifts against the door and the window, sealing them inside a dim, howling cocoon. For 2 days, they were prisoners of the storm. Caleb kept the fire roaring, his face grim as he rationed their wood. Mai made their food last, her movements calm and deliberate, a small island of peace in the tempest. On the 3rd day, the crisis shifted from without to within. Lily began to cough, a dry, rasping sound that echoed Caleb's deepest fear. By nightfall, she was burning with fever, her small body trembling beneath the quilts. Caleb's composure finally shattered. He paced the small space like a caged animal, his hands clenching and unclenching, his face a mask of raw terror. He saw his first wife, Sarah, in Lily's fever-bright eyes, felt the same crushing helplessness that had consumed him years ago. He was a man capable of taming the wild land, of facing down wolves and drought, but against the spectre of this sickness, he was powerless. But Mai was not. She moved with a quiet, fierce authority. She gently pushed Caleb aside, her touch surprisingly firm. "Boil water," she commanded, her voice low but clear, leaving no room for argument. She opened her small silk-wrapped packet of herbs, the contents releasing a strange, earthy aroma into the air. These were the remedies of her grandmother, carried across an ocean, remedies for fever and for fear. She did not panic. She did not falter. As the storm raged outside, she began her own battle inside, fighting for the life of the child who had been the first to see her not as a transaction, but as a person. Trapped in the firelit gloom of the cabin, with the wind a constant, shrieking reminder of their isolation, the walls between them finally crumbled. For hours, Mai tended to Lily, bathing her forehead with cool water, murmuring to her in her own language, her voice a soft, continuous prayer. Caleb could only watch, his earlier panic giving way to a raw, aching vulnerability. The woman he had bought, the stranger he had kept at arm's length, was now the sole anchor in his storm-tossed world. In the darkest hour of the night, with Lily's breathing shallow and laboured, Caleb sank into the chair opposite Mai. The fire cast long, dancing shadows on their faces. "I lost her mother the same way," he said, his voice a broken whisper. "The fever came on fast. The doctor was a day's ride away. I just watched her fade." The confession, torn from the deepest part of his grief, hung in the air between them. He had never spoken of it to anyone. Mai listened, her eyes never leaving his. The shared fear for the child had opened a door he had long since bolted shut. After a long silence, she spoke, her own voice barely audible above the wind. "My family," she began, her gaze distant, afire. "In the city." The door was locked from the outside. She didn't need to say more. The horror of it, the unimaginable loss, was etched in the lines of her face. In that moment, they were no longer a master and his purchased wife. They were two survivors, two souls scarred by fire and fever, finding a flicker of understanding in the heart of a blizzard. They were bound not by a contract, but by the universal language of loss and the desperate, shared hope for the small life sleeping between them. As dawn broke on the fifth day, the world was reborn in silence and blinding white. The wind had died, and the blizzard had passed. And with it, Lily's fever had broken. She was weak, but her eyes were clear, and she slept a deep, healing sleep. The relief that washed over Caleb was so profound it left him trembling. He looked at Mai, who was slumped in her chair, exhausted but watchful, and a new, unspoken understanding passed between them. They had weathered the storm, both outside and in. The homestead was buried in snow, and their supplies were dangerously low. Caleb knew he had to get to town. This time, when he prepared the sleigh, he did not assume he would go alone. He simply looked at Mai, a silent question in his eyes. She nodded and bundled up, a quiet acceptance of their new partnership. The town of Dust Devil Creek was just beginning to dig itself out. As they pulled up to the general store, they became the immediate focus of attention. Doors opened, and faces appeared in windows. The town's latent prejudice, always simmering beneath the surface, was now emboldened by their shared hardship. Barlow, the merchant who had brokered their arrangement, stood on the porch, a smirk on his face. "Well, look what the storm dragged in," he called out, his voice thick with malice. "Still got your little china doll, Caleb? Hope you got your money's worth out of the purchase." The word purchase struck the air like a whip. Caleb, who had once viewed Mai as exactly that, felt a hot surge of fury. He stopped, turned slowly, and stepped in front of Mai, shielding her with his body. His voice was not loud, but it cut through the cold air with the deadly chill of honed steel. "Her name," he said, his eyes locked on Barlow, "is Mai. She is my wife." He reached back, his hand finding hers, his grip firm and protective. The public declaration, an act of defiance and possession, silenced the entire street. It was a line drawn in the snow, a claiming that was for all the world, and most importantly, for her, to see. The journey home was cloaked in a different kind of silence. It was no longer a wall of ice or a void of loneliness, but a shared space of quiet contemplation. The simple, powerful words, "She is my wife," echoed in the vast, white landscape. Caleb had not just defended her, he had claimed her, redefined their entire existence in front of the world that judged them both. The transactional arrangement had been publicly burned away, leaving something new and uncertain in its ashes. They did not speak of it, but the air in the sleigh was charged with the weight of that moment. Back in the cabin, the warmth of the fire felt different, more welcoming. Lily was sitting up, sipping a broth Mai had made, her smile a small beacon of their shared victory. That evening, after the child was asleep, Caleb went to a small, locked wooden chest in the corner of the room, a chest he had not opened since his first wife's passing. He returned not with words, but with a small, simple silver ring, its surface worn smooth with time. He held it out to Mai on the palm of his calloused hand. It was not a demand. It was not part of a transaction. It was a question, an offering, a plea. His eyes met hers, and in their depths, she saw the full truth of his transformation, the fear, the gratitude, the hesitant bloom of a feeling he had thought long dead. Mai looked from his face to the ring resting in his hand. Her own past, a world of pain and flight, warred with this fragile, offered future. Slowly, deliberately, she reached out and took the ring. She slid it onto her finger, a perfect, gleaming fit. It was a silent vow, an acceptance of a new beginning forged in a crucible of snow and sickness. The house was no longer a monument to a ghost, it had become a home for the living. Spring arrived as a slow, determined thaw. The great mountains of snow receded, revealing the sleeping earth beneath. Trickles of meltwater ran in the gullies, a quiet, insistent song of renewal. The world outside the cabin began to reflect the change that had taken place within it. The harsh, monochrome landscape burst forth in a riot of green grasses and colorful wildflowers. Mai, with a quiet joy, began a small garden behind the house, her hands turning the dark, rich soil. She planted seeds for vegetables, but also for flowers whose names Caleb did not know, vibrant blossoms that seemed to have carried the memory of a warmer sun across the ocean. Lily, now strong and vibrant, was a constant presence at her side, her laughter a frequent and welcome sound that carried on the breeze. Caleb worked his land with a renewed purpose. The weight he had carried for so long had lifted, replaced by a sense of profound, quiet peace. But now, he would often pause in his work, leaning against his plow, and his gaze would drift back to the cabin. He would watch Mai in her garden, her dark hair catching the light, a small, resilient flower in her own right. He would see Lily running to her, throwing her arms around her legs, and a slow, unpracticed smile would touch his lips. He had paid for a housekeeper, a transaction born of desperation and grief. What he had received was a woman who had quietly mended the broken pieces of his world, who had brought life back to his home and his heart. She had taught him that a home is not built with logs and nails, but with quiet acts of grace, and that the most profound declarations of love are often spoken in the deepest silence. They were a family, forged not by law or contract, but by the shared crucible of a winter storm and the earned warmth of a long-awaited spring. Thank you for watching this story to the end. We believe in the power of stories to not only entertain but also to inspire and touch the heart. This tale of resilience, love, and redemption is a reminder that even in the harshest of winters, the warmth of human connection can thaw the most frozen of hearts. If this story moved you, please consider showing your support by liking this video and sharing it with someone who appreciates emotional and inspirational narratives. Every like, share, and comment helps us to continue creating content like this. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell so you never miss a new story. By subscribing, you become a part of our community, a community that values deep, meaningful storytelling. We have many more tales to tell, and we would be honored to share them with you. Until next time, may you find warmth in unexpected places and strength in the quiet moments of your life.